lightning and thunder situation where he's this bigger back. He could potentially get the goal line role. Zach Charbonnet could push for a timeshare. It's just if I want to shoot for a potential league winner, to me, that is the rookie.
There is no position in fantasy football where league winners emerge more often than at running back. And year after year, we can find gold in the later rounds. Matthew Betz of Fantasy Football has joined me to talk through 5 running backs that we believe have championship winning upside. Matthew, you're not only fantastic at analysing which players we should be drafting, but you're also one of the very best injury analysts around. I'm very picky when it comes to who I pay attention to with this stuff, and I always like hearing your opinion. So before we get to the league winning running backs, which injury situation do you think is out there that isn't being talked about enough right now?
Yeah, I appreciate that, Tom. It's good to be here. I'm excited to talk about running backs. It's a very fun position in fantasy. But before we get into that, like you said, some of the injury takes, I feel like this offseason, the headlines from an injury perspective have been dominated by Matthew Stafford with his lower back issue and disc issue, and then as well, Chris Godwin. Those are kind of the 2 big ones. One that I think is kind of a sneaky thing to monitor throughout the entire season is Malik Neighbors, and not because of the shoulder injury, which was very mild, or this low back tightness in the last, week and a half. It's more this chronic toe issue. And, this goes back to last season. He dealt with this in December of last year. He's also dealt with this at LSU. So obviously, he's an incredible player. He goes in the first round for a reason. When he's on the field, he is going to be fantastic. But he already acknowledged earlier this offseason that eventually down the line, at some point, he will likely need surgery on this toe. So I'm not saying it's a ticking time bomb per se, but he's a guy in the first round that nobody really talks about from an injury perspective that, don't get me wrong, like in best ball and stuff, I've taken my fair share of Malik Neighbors. I don't want to be out on a player like this, but I do think if you're, in one league this year, if you're in a redraft league, whatever it is, and you want to kind of just break ties with somebody in that like pick 10 to 12 range that he kind of goes in, I think it's a fair take. I think there's a chance we could see this toe injury pop up at some point down the season. And the fact that he's already acknowledged it's kind of a lingering issue that needs to be addressed at some point in the future tells you he'll be playing through it this year. Again, he's shown us he can do it, but it is one of those things that I'm monitoring very closely throughout the season.
I love that because it's really such a strong round 1 this year. And there's so many good players in that sort of first 18 picks that hitting on your first player is really going to matter, particularly if, we get really good expected outcomes from that sort of top 15, top 18 players. And in recent weeks, we've seen Puka Nacua start to slide. We've seen Neighbors just slide ever so slightly. And the importance of that, to me, just means hitting on your late round players feels even more important. And that's what we're going to talk about today, starting with a guy who I was very pleased you picked, Zach Charbonnet. We've seen glimpses of him as the RB1, and it's been fantastic. We've seen standalone value from him over the years. But what is it that drives you towards picking him as your first running back here? Is it because of that standalone value that we've seen, or is it just like Ken Walker's foot injury is still lingering a bit?
Yeah, you've hit on it already, right? We kind of already know. And as fantasy players, when you see something happen, you feel more confident in it. And we've seen it's a very simple formula. When Ken Walker is out, Zach Charbonnet is in, and he gets everything pretty much from a workload standpoint. So he was a guy that, going back to like his rookie profile coming out of UCLA, we all really liked him over at the Fantasy Footballers. And then he kind of landed in a spot where it's like, that stinks. He's stuck behind Ken Walker. But when you see him on the field, when he gets his opportunities, he does produce. So he does have that contingent upside. Should Ken Walker miss time because of his foot injury or another injury down the line, that's in the range of outcomes. But the other thing for me, when I look at this backfield, this is a brand new offensive coordinator. Clint Kubiak comes over from New Orleans, really good run scheme that he had there. And you think about the moves that this team has made over the offseason. They let DK Metcalf go. They move on from Geno. They fire their offensive coordinator. This team won 10 games for throwing the football too much. Mike McDonald is a through and through defensive guy. This defense was awesome in the last month and a half last year. They struggled early on with him, but they got really good down the stretch. I think this defense could be very, very good. And what did they do when they did their roster cuts? Tell us everything we need to know about what to expect from Seattle this year. Run the football. They kept 4 tight ends on the roster and 2 fullbacks. So it's not a secret what this team wants to do and what they want to be. Play good defense, run the football. And so I think there's a chance, I'm not saying it's likely, but I think there is a chance that Zach Charbonnet could push for a timeshare this year with this new coordinator, which we haven't seen before. So you kind of have like that range of outcomes that exists. You also have the contingent upside that exists. And we've already seen in small flashes in the preseason, he's looked awesome in this scheme. So I'm pretty excited about the Seattle running game. That I'm not fading Ken Walker by any means, but if I don't get Walker early on, I am targeting Zach Charbonnet later in my drafts.
Yeah, I love that. And it's been such an easy click for me all off season. And again, I've taken plenty of Kenneth Walker, but I've taken more Zach Charbonnet, definitely, particularly in best ball. And I'll be looking to get more of him in redraft over the coming week. And one of the points which you mentioned, it's just Zach Charbonnet's upside is so high. Like last year, we saw Ken Walker do more in the passing game than previous, but like Charbonnet, I think it's fair to say, is the better pass catcher. He ranked 12th in yards per target last year, had the fourth highest catch rate among running backs at 91%. And I think that's going to be music to the ears of Sam Darnold, because Sam Darnold is always looking for a safety net, isn't he? Like, and that offensive line, it might be okay, but it's possibly not going to be one of the top units in the league. I think that would be fair to say. Last year, he peppered Aaron Jones with 59 targets, which was the 8th most among running backs. And it just feels like even if Charbonnet doesn't necessarily carve out a role where he's pushing ahead of Kenneth Walker, the pass catching role can be so strong that we could end up seeing him have real value in just standalone weeks anyway, because we've seen that over years. You know, you go back to guys like Devonta Freeman and Tevin Coleman or Mark Ingram, Alvin Kamara. It doesn't always have to be so cut and dry as just one running back and the other's just backup value. But is there a point where Zach Charbonnet could become too expensive in drafts for you, or do you feel like his contingent value is just fine?
I think there is a point potentially. The nice thing is in the kind of home league settings, he doesn't really go in that spot. I will say recently, if you've been doing basketball drafts kind of in the last handful of days, on DraftKings especially, he's like in the 90s now. You know, before he would go 120-ish range. So it's definitely a different conversation at that point. You know, that said, in hindsight, if Ken Walker goes down, you're going to wish you had Charbonnet. So it's kind of a personal preference. But I do think in home league, you know, ADP redraft settings, he will go later than kind of what's been most recently the trend in best ball.
Yeah, well, we'll get to another running back in a moment, but if you're finding us for the first time, thank you. We truly appreciate it here at Fantasy Sanctuary. When you've watched this video, hit the subscribe button and then go and check out these videos with Matthew Uberi, Ian Hartitz, Justin Boone, loads of great guests on the Sanctuary. But today we are here with Matthew Betz, and I want to bring up Tyler Allgeier, who's been one of my guys all off season, been a target for me in dynasty leagues, in redraft, and in best ball. And the gap between Allgeier and Bijan Robinson, it's the 12th biggest gap between an RB1 and an RB2 in the league. There is a mass of RB2s drafted before Allgeier, and I just don't understand it, because he finished 10th in explosive run rate last year, 7th in juke rate. Now, obviously, when Bijan's healthy, he's going to get a huge amount of the ball. But much like Zach Charbonnet, who we just talked about, Tyler Allgeier can have contingent value and standalone value. Over the last 2 seasons, he's had 6 RB3, which top 36 weekly finishes. And I just think that when we get into the bye weeks, this is going to be the kind of guy who people are desperate for to give you even just low-end double-digit PPR points per week. Have you found yourself drafting much Tyler Allgeier, Matthew?
I've taken a ton of him in best ball specifically, where like there's so much value in these contingent running back picks if they hit. And then the nice thing about Allgeier and Charbonnet and some other backs, you know, when you know who the RB2 is, it's very, very powerful when that happens. There are a lot of situations right now that we don't really know. Like in Green Bay, if Josh Jacobs goes down, we all thought it would be Marshawn Lloyd. Well, Marshawn Lloyd's injured again. So like, is it Chris Brooks? Is it Emmanuel Wilson? Is it Lloyd later in the year when he comes back? We don't really know. Same thing with like the Bears situation. We're not sure. Is it Monangai? Is it Roshan? You know, without a doubt, if Bijan goes down, Tyler Allgeier is the dude. So yeah, I love him as part of like zero running back builds or hero RB builds. I've taken a decent amount of him. So yeah, and I'm kind of excited about the Falcons this year just because of how condensed the touches are going to be among kind of their top weapons. Like, you know, they don't really have wide receiver depth.
Yeah.
Darnell Mooney is entering the season with a shoulder issue. Kyle Pitts, we've done this for years. We kind of know what to expect there. And then you have the running backs and Drake London, of course. It's like there's no real ancillary guys kind of coming in here. You know what you're getting. So yeah, I love that that call that we're there with Allgeier. One of those guys you stash on the bench, and if things break your way, could be a potential league winner.
Do you have any concerns with the Falcons offense about like Caleb McGarry's down? Obviously, he was supposed to protect Michael Penix's blind side, and obviously that is a huge loss to them. But do you think that they can be functional enough in the run game without him? Like I've kind of been fairly on this Tyler Allgeier train for so long that perhaps it's getting a little hard for me to get off. But it feels like hopefully they can scheme around it. Do you think that'll be the case, or do you worry that it's like too much for a quarterback who hasn't really had that many starts?
Yeah, I think that is the biggest concern for me. Not as much in the run game, which McGarry is very good in the run game. So I'm not saying it won't hurt. I
Yeah.
think it will. But Michael Penix has 3 starts under his belt, and he is experienced in general because of how much he played in college. But in the NFL, obviously very inexperienced. Now he loses his blindside protector, and I feel like not a lot of people are talking about that very much. So yeah, I'm with you. I'm very, very fascinated to see what that looks like in the first couple weeks of the season, because there's some offensive line injuries that teams can plan for, right? Like if it happens in the first week of camp, like, unique situation in LA with the Chargers where they can just kind of put Joe Alt over there, but they lose Rashawn Slater in like the first week of camp. Okay, now we have 5 weeks to figure that out. This happened, last week, basically, or even earlier this week that we got the news. So it's like you got a week and a half here to kind of figure it out and go, and then you're into live game action. So yeah, I am a little bit concerned about that. I'm interested to see how it goes. I'm just trying to look up where Brandon Thorne with established run. He does great offensive line work.
I think he
Where
dropped
he
them
has
down
them.
to like low 20s. I think they were early teens, and then I believe he dropped them down to low 20s. I might be wrong with that.
Correct. Yeah, he's got them 23rd in his ranking. So definitely,
Yeah.
definitely a hit there.
Yeah, and the first couple of weeks of the season aren't cupcake matchups by any means. They start with the Bucks, and then they play the Vikings, who we all expect to be a very good defense. But then they play the Panthers, and then they play the Commanders, teams where we can get at them. And I feel like by week 4, you should have a good idea of whether Algier is going to contribute on standalone value or not, and how this run game is going to look. Let's move over to another one of your players, though, Betz. Bhaysul Tuten, and this running back room for Jags, it has been probably one of the most talked about all off season because it's been so murky. You've got Etienne, who rarely plays consistently through an entire season, but is probably the best pass catcher in the group. There's Tank Bigsby, who can be woefully inefficient, but then at times look pretty decent. And then you've got Tuten, the guy who seems to be very much the regime's guy, but he's not exactly flawless himself because he does have problems with fumbling. What is it about him that makes you so keen to take him as kind of one of your guys for this year?
Yeah, when you look at the Jags running back room, the nice thing about this that makes you feel uncomfortable in a good way is just how ambiguous it is. And there's been so much research in the fantasy space. JJ Zacharyason's done a great job with this type of stuff, showing ambiguous situations are where these league winning players come from. So even though it feels very uncomfortable and you don't know the answer and that doesn't feel good to you, there is league winning potential in this backfield. So across like a best ball portfolio, I've taken all 3 of these guys, just kind of hoping on the right team in the right weeks they get hot. In a redraft league where you can drop these guys and you can manage your bench, I want to shoot for the overall upside, that the best case scenario. And to me, that is Bhaysul Tuten, where he is a rookie. He comes in with this brand new head coach, this brand new general manager, and there was already like rumblings in like March, April when this NFL draft happened that the team wasn't in love with Tank Bigsby, and he had a fumbling issue, and the team wasn't really in love with Travis Etienne. And when you think about this kind of new age Jaguars regime, the writing is on the wall. They're going to let go of Travis Etienne after this season. So it makes so much sense in the world to say, if these guys falter in any way, let's give the rookie a shot and see what he has. You have it up here on the screen. His speed, incredible. 4.32 in the 40-yard dash.
Yeah.
99th percentile speed score, considering his weight. Coming out of college, tons of yards after contact per attempt, was up there with some of the best backs in the class. Just ultra, ultra explosive. And when you kind of think about who he's competing with, they're good backs, but they're not the best backs in the world, obviously. So there is a world that he could just take this job from these 2 incumbents. It might take some time, which is why, like in a redraft setting, I prefer him, where you can just put him on the bench, you wait, and you kind of just see what happens in Jacksonville in a scheme that we like with Liam Cohen, there in Jacksonville. So that's where I'm at with Tuten. Like I said, it's not that I'm not taking the other guys. It's just if I want to shoot for a potential league winner, to me, that is the rookie.
Yeah, generally speaking, I end up staying away from freeway committees a lot more often because, I mean, the ambiguity is obviously creates massive upside, but it just feels so much easier to survive two-headed backfields. This one I have been making an exception for. It comes back to some of the stuff that James Gladstone, the GM, said. Like, apparently in his interview, he held up Bhaysul Tuten as a guy that he wanted to draft as somebody that would be great for the team. And then they go out there and they get him. And it just does feel like something will change within this running back room. And where that one of the guys doesn't end up dressing on game day and it becomes straight up two-headed committee, then that'll make life a lot easier for us. And I think that Tuten, particularly as the cheapest option right now in redraft leagues, is well worth people's attention. We are so close to 4,500 subscribers here on the Fantasy Sanctuary. I know that you watching right now are going to hit that subscribe button because you like quality content just like this. Now, let's talk about another one of my players, Austin Ekeler. Now, I've got to start this by taking a bit of an L because last year I was very much out on Austin Ekeler. It wasn't purely because of how slow he looked when he was with the Chargers, that one clip where everybody lost their minds. It was more of I expected better from Brian Robinson. I thought Brian Robinson would work in Cliff Kingsbury's scheme really well, and I thought that he could be more explosive than he ended up being. Meanwhile, it ended up being Austin Ekeler, who was probably the better value given where he went in drafts. And his receiving work was really solid. He had the 12th most receiving yards among running backs, despite the fact that he ran the 31st most routes. So there's a chance that could see more of an uptick this year if now we get Jaden Daniels being a little more comfortable and being able to do more of that stuff. And then Ekeler, he had the 7th highest target share among running backs at 11%, ranked 4th in yards per target. And I think that there is the potential, whilst everybody's losing their mind about JCM or wondering if Chris Rodriguez is the deep, deep sleeper that we need, could Austin Ekeler end up getting the goal line work? He only had 3 red zone carries last year, so any kind of uptick there would represent a massive opportunity. Have you found yourself drafting much Austin Ekeler this year, Matthew?
I have. Yeah, I have a ton of Ekeler. And I was actually very into him even before the Brian Robinson trade happened. Especially when I was, doing best ball leagues all summer. It's like this guy was just going so late, and I do a lot on DraftKings where it's full PPR. It fits his skill set very, very well. The price was awesome. And then when the Brian Robinson news became more clear, and then eventually we got the actual news of the trade, it was like, JCM's price tag shot up. Eckler's just kind of like slowly started to climb. And I was like, I'm taking Ekeler instead here. Not that I'm not like excited for what could be with JCM and Bill. I think it's very fun. It's a very fun story, for the Fantasy Footballer show. I hope it sticks around because it's just fun to hear that drop every time. But this is a 7th round rookie that literally everybody in the NFL passed on, not once, not twice, not 3 times, the entire draft, right until the very end. I mean, I'm not saying guys can't hit in the 7th round. It's unlikely, obviously, and it happens. But I think the Brian Robinson trade was more that he doesn't fit the system and the scheme of what they're looking for versus like, we love this guy so much, we have to get rid of Brian Robinson. I think JCM will have a chance here and there throughout the season to kind of show what he can do. But I really do think Ekeler is going to lead this backfield in touches. And when you're looking at, the kind of archetype that I like, it's these guys that have the pass catching ability and could potentially get goal line work. The tricky thing with him is, Jaden Daniels is obviously going to get his at the goal line. There's a little bit of rumblings of like Chris Rodriguez around the goal line. We'll see.
Yeah.
But we're only 1 year removed from Ekeler back in the Chargers days. I mean, he was awesome at the goal line. So I do think there is a chance he can take that role as well. So yeah, I've been taking a decent amount of Ekeler, and I think in home league settings too, redraft settings, there is still enough meat on the bone there, so to speak, at his ADP to take a swing.
Just changing gears slightly to the medical side of it. Obviously, last year, Ekeler had the fewest touches that he's had in a healthy season, probably since like his rookie year in 2017. Now, he is 30 years old, but do you think there's anything in that at this point, as he's getting older, he is 30 years old, that having fewer touches can help him be more explosive? We know what a sicko he is for the kind of workouts he does and that he really tries to drive that as much as possible. Is there any kind of like data or any thought process that would make you more confident because of that fewer touches that he had last year?
Well, I think for Ekeler, we have to recall kind of his season, right? In week 12, he had the concussion that kept him out basically the entire season until week 18. And then he also had a concussion earlier in week 4. So he had 2 in the same season, which is why you saw that delayed or that prolonged recovery, I should say, later in the year. But when he was on the field, last year, there's plenty of opportunities in those weeks where he's seeing double-digit opportunities. Now, that was with Brian Robinson also splitting the work and that sort of thing. But you did see there was a week without Brian Robinson. He played 70% of the snaps, 15 opportunities. I think that is possible again this year, and they could get somewhere in that 13 to 16-ish range on a week in and week out basis. I would be surprised if you're seeing the Ekeler of old, where it's like he's getting everything and he's getting 20 opportunities per game. I'd be surprised just based off his career arc and kind of how things have trended with where he's at. He's clearly not the same player he was, but I do think you'll see more than just a handful here and there. I think he's going to lead this backfield an opportunity for sure. And like you said, he takes care of himself in the gym. Nobody is doubting that. The guy's an absolute monster.
Yeah. And ultimately, I just want to take shots at this team because we know they've got the potential to be very fun. Obviously, lots of people got burned by CJ Stroud taking a backward step last year, but I'm not sure it was all on him. And I'm not expecting the same from Jaden Daniels because what we saw from him just seems so calm and composed. And hopefully the Commanders are very fun. Now, moving over to a team who might not be as fun, the Miami Dolphins. Ollie Gordon is your last guy. And is this another injury-driven situation because Devon Achan's dealing with that calf injury situation, which has been murky at best, or is there something else about Ollie Gordon that's bringing you towards him?
Yeah, I think it's a combination of a few things. You do have the Devon Achan calf issue that's, by all signs, mild and should be fine for week one, but we've heard that story before with calf injuries, especially this close to the season. They do linger. There's a high re-injury risk with them. I'm not saying Devon Achan will get hurt, but if he does, as things stand right now, it is Ollie Gordon and pretty much nobody else behind him. Jalen Wright just had a small procedure. I don't know the specifics on that, but he's going to be out probably about a month plus.
Yeah.
And behind them, they had to re-sign Jeff Wilson to the practice squad, and I forget the other running back. But basically, there's no depth here. Yeah. So when you look at it, Ollie Gordon has looked pretty good in his opportunities in the preseason. Jalen Wright has not, even before the injury. And last year, when you're looking at some of the advanced data on like success rate and some of the advanced analytics, broken tackle rate, stuff like that, Jalen Wright was abysmal last year. And this team does not really have financial commitment to give him the RB2 job. So this is Ollie Gordon's for the taking. I truthfully don't know how good Ollie Gordon is. This is a guy that 2 years ago in college won the Doak Walker Award winner as the best running back in the country. Last year at Oklahoma State, they really fell off. And I'm not like a huge, I study the college game when we get to the offseason, but in season, I'm a fan, I watch, but I'm not like analyzing everything. So I don't know the specifics on like roster turnover or where the offensive line was at, but he took a major step back last year from his production the year before. I feel like there's probably somewhere in the middle of those two seasons, there's the truth on Ollie Gordon. When you look back at Doak Walker Award winners, like it's pretty eye-opening. Ashton Genty, Ollie Gordon 2 years ago, Bijan Robinson, Ken Walker, Najee Harris, Jonathan Taylor did it twice. Bryce Love, Donta Foreman, Derrick Henry, Melvin Gordon. That's the last
Seems
decade.
Good.
And obviously those guys were drafted way earlier, so it's not the exact same formula, but just like there might be something there. And when you think about kind of the archetype of how he fits with Devon Achan, it's kind of a nice lightning and thunder situation where he's this bigger back. He could potentially get the goal line role, have one of those random Raheem Mostert seasons where he's just getting all these touchdowns if they're good. So I think you see contingent upside with Achan, with Jalen Wright injuries going on. And then also just what if he is the RB2 role in this offense where we've seen that be very, very valuable in the past. So yeah, I think Ollie Gordon, the best ball community is really on this in home leagues. I mean, you can get him with probably your last pick or two based off current ADP.
Yeah, he's kind of one where I'd possibly prioritize him ahead of taking defense or kicker if you're in those kind of leagues, because otherwise you might end up losing him and it'll feel really painful. But one thing that feels like we can't underestimate is jobs are on the line in Miami right now. Like Mike McDaniel looks about 20 years older than he did when he took the job. And it feels like, the best players are going to play. And Jalen Wright hasn't shown us enough for us to believe that even if healthy, he deserves snaps over Ollie Gordon, who, if anything was to linger with Devon Achan, then I've got much more faith that Ollie Gordon could be a 3-down back than Jalen Wright could see a significant number of touches. We know, though, like the Dolphins potentially are a bit of a mess. They look a real bottom tier unit on defense. When you get to these kind of players where it's like, okay, I'm taking deep dart throws towards the end of my drafts, do you worry about things like the offensive line unit? Because Miami, it's been quite a while since they had a good one. But on the flip side, we've got Mike McDaniel, who has designed some really good run games. How much does any of that weigh into your thinking, or do you just go, this is pretty much a free lottery ticket and I'm happy to take it and I'll drop him if I need to?
Yeah, I think that's kind of how I'm thinking about it. That second scenario there, where there definitely are concerns. Don't get me wrong. I think there's a decent chance, and if you're looking at like the betting markets, Mike McDaniel is the first odds-on favorite coach to get fired, which it's kind of sad that even exists, but it does.
Yeah.
Jobs are on the line, right? Like you said, and it's kind of now or never for the staff. And they lose their left tackle, Tron Armstead. It was already a banged up offensive line. They're counting on some guys coming off legit injuries last year to step back up on the offensive line. So I wouldn't be surprised if the line is a mess and it's not great. And we're having this conversation, throughout the year where it's like this is an issue. But at the same time, we're not talking about that for the player going in the third round of your draft, right? This is the 14th round or 15th round or whatever it is, where there's no opportunity cost whatsoever to take that risk. And like you said, if the team is not working, if Jalen Wright comes back and takes the job or whatever it is, you can just move on and drop him. And those are the kind of swings I like to take in redraft. But yeah, you have to acknowledge the offensive line play is definitely a concern.
Yeah. Well, Betz, this has been an absolute blast. Really enjoyed getting your perspective on those players. I know that it's been an excellent offseason for you in terms of covering best ball, but obviously you'll be switching to DFS mindset imminently. Is there anything else in particular that the people watching should go and check out over the coming week or so?
Yes, we've got 2 shows a week. Kyle and I do with the Fantasy Footballers DFS and Betting podcast that comes out Tuesdays and Fridays. Every Friday, we look at the main slate and kind of talk about that. And then Tuesday, we give like a preview of the slate and recap the week before. So you kind of get both ends of the spectrum there. And then I also host the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty podcast that comes out every Wednesday.
Excellent. Well, it's going to be a very fun season. If you haven't already, hit the like, hit the subscribe button. Let us know who your favorite late round running back is. And after you're done here, go and check out this video with Justin Boone, where we talk through some of his favorite sleepers right now.